don't know, what if you're looking for evidence in terms of what would satisfy you, make your belief go from
Yo, uncle, let me get in, please.
What is our criteria?
That's a big camera, man. Uncle.
No, sorry, man. Uncle. Sorry, can I, for the camera?
Maybe I have a completely different consensus
Content over everything!
from you. So I'm not sure I can answer that so well. Although about consciousness, it would be interesting to talk a bit more about that.
Okay, let's talk about consciousness.
I was just going to say, just to possibly like, maybe just put it into context, what he made. Would you say cross-analysis and meta-analysis as well? Because you said it's knowledge. So you want to read up, you want to explore the different religions before you make a conscious decision whether or not you are religious or not.
Absolutely.
So would you say meta-analysis? Just to contextualize, I guess.
Well, sure. I need to research many things.
Absolutely.
Before I would make any choice, you know. But about consciousness, so there's an idea.
What is your understanding of consciousness? Let's start with that.
I'm not sure. So let's see. It's an idea that it's a product of our advanced brains. That it's a byproduct of evolution. In that,
really?
Well, yeah, because one of the major things that we use our consciousness for is to understand the possibilities of the future and understand the experience of the past. And that's one of the reasons, in theory, that we're such good survivors, is that we conceptualize the future.
So you're saying that an organism that cannot think about the future is not conscious, by your definition?
I can't really make a scientific definition of it.
It's not a scientific definition, trust me. The definition you gave, I'm working with that. So you're saying for us to predict the future, for example, how to survive better and so on, okay? So my counter question to that would be, an organism like amoeba, yes, who doesn't really plan for the future, yes, all it cares about is trying to survive the best possibility, trying to eat, trying to basically do whatever it wants, yes, in the simplest form. Does it have consciousness? Is it aware of its surrounding?
Most likely not.
It is. Others it wouldn't be able to feed. You see what I mean?
No, aware.
In order for you to understand the difference between what is food and what is not food, you need to be aware of your environment, yes? You can't just eat everything, because everything that amoeba comes across is not food.
I don't think it's that simple.
No, I'm saying, to be aware of your environment is one of the key things for your consciousness to be active.
But that's not what I said. I talked about conceptualizing possibilities in the future and understanding the experience of the past.
Yeah, but that's why I'm asking. Your definition seems very limited to what consciousness really is. Because consciousness, for example, are you conscious that you exist?
Not this one again.
It's not,
right, cool.
It can sound philosophical.
No, it is. But I'm aware of the fact that I have
But because of the definition of consciousness, you need to understand first whether you exist, whether that your surrounding is something that is real. It's not some aliens who got some device in your brain and trying to basically create this environment around you.
Yeah.
So are you aware that you're conscious?
Very good.
Are you aware that you exist? What's that? Take one. I thought it was a toy for me.
Well, it's the brain in the jar argument.
What do you think of that?
Well, I had this discussion one time before here in Speaker's Corner, and I don't particularly think most people want to hear it again, because it's really a dead end. I'm aware that I think and that I understand my own thoughts, but everything outside of that, I can't actually prove that it exists or not. But I run on the assumption that it does.
But even you saying, I think, yes? How do you know that is you thinking? Or somebody forcing you to think the way you think?
Maybe you don't, maybe it's true, maybe you aren't.
So you see, even your thinking, even the most basic of that, you're unsure of.
But it is something that would exist.
Okay.
If we talk about existence,
for many atheists, I'm not saying for you, for many atheists, all this, I know, that's why I said not for you. You made it very clear. So for many atheists, all this existence is just meaningless. It doesn't have a meaning. So everything is just random matter, yes, coming together randomly, producing all these effects from that particular cause, yes?
Could you not make your own meaning, though?
You could, but I'm saying we need to then understand or basically analyze that particular definition. It's quite important, isn't it? So if everything was meaningless, like they say, I'm not saying like you say, then for us, even consciousness doesn't even matter. Everything is just meaningless, just random material coming together and just behaving randomly, and one day it is going to finish. And that's why we come, you see, for us as theists, for us as someone who believes in God, we start with the premise that God exists. You know why? Because we believe that there has to be some cause to bring all these things, material and non-material, into existence. And if there is an alternative from your perspective, what would that be?
Oh,
The
that thing?
existence of everything.
Okay. It could exist by chance for no reason.
No, but how does it originate?
I have no idea. Can't be answered.
You must have thought about it.
Can I just throw?
But
Can I throw?
How could I
Can I
possibly
throw in
answer
one?
that?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. What do you guys think about the?
What do you guys? You mean the agnostic?
Just the two of you.
Oh,
two
the
of
two
you.
of you.
Like
Sorry,
just two of
sorry.
you. Two of you.
I
Just
just
a
didn't-
just random philosophical question. What do you guys think about the idea that even within nothing, there is still something?
I don't buy that.
Just in the sense that nothing is still something. It represents
Nothing doesn't exist, my friend.
something.
Nothing doesn't exist. It's a concept.
But that's what I'm trying to say. The concept still exists.
Yeah, but the concept doesn't exist in the sense that it is something that, for example, infinity.
Yeah.
Does it exist?
Does infinity exist?
Yes.
Can't be proven.
No, but does it exist?
No.
There you go. So concept of nothing is similar to infinity. One is extreme at this edge, and the other is extreme the other end. Because infinity, in order for the mathematicians to do certain calculations and for the philosophers to understand certain concepts,
Yeah.
yes, we use this term for us human beings to basically communicate effectively. Same thing with nothing. Because to me, nothing is basically the absence of everything.
But that's what
if it's absent of everything, I believe it doesn't even exist.
But then
It's just a concept for us to communicate better. That's
I
all.
was treating it as almost a like how you kind of reference light is the absence of darkness, and darkness is the absence of
Yeah, but
light.
light is photons, you know. Light
Yeah, I
is not
understand.
nothing.
I
Light is
understand.
nothing. But if you talk about
Light
darkness,
is very interesting because it has mass and it doesn't have mass.
well, that is it still matters. For us,
It
look,
exists.
For us, I didn't say anything about mass. Remember, I said about something. When I say something, to me, light is something. It's not nothing. Light is something. Yes.
Yes,
Some
sure.
people call it waves. Some call it particles, and they both are correct.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's nothing.
No, absolutely.
Light is something.
Absolutely.
Darkness, that's a good thing. What you just defined. I agree
Yeah.
with that. It's the absence of light. But does it exist? Yes, absence of light exists in many places.
But that's
in
why-
space, there is no light, but there is darkness there. But that is just space, maybe empty space. What I'm saying is that space itself exists. Yes? Does
Understand?
time exist?
Yeah. It does.
Does time exist?
Well, I'm not sure how time is correctly defined because it might be the time is measured in how things change. You can't see time unless things change.
So time is
Things
not
like that.
material. You're right. Time is not material.
Yeah.
It is it's a means of measurement of
Yeah,
how
yeah,
we
absolutely.
linearly think. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to think many things.
Yeah.
And it's again a concept to measure basically a change from A to B.
Yeah.
So everything is measured.
I just wanted to.
Yes.
I just
So
wanted,
what I'm saying is that there are many things in our conversation that we
Yeah.
talk about which might just be concepts, but they are quite important concepts without which it's not possible to have a meaningful discussion.
Sure.
So if anyone says nothing exists, then they don't know the meaning of it. Nothing. Because to me, nothing is a concept. It is not something that exists in real world. It is a concept to understand the absence of everything.
but then something has to exist for you to make that assertion. If nothing ever
You
existed,
exist.
yeah,
You're
then-
making that
No,
assertion.
absolutely, absolutely. But if nothing exists, right, and nothing is defined by the existence of something, right? So we measure nothing by the absence of something.
Not really.
Do we
Are
not?
you able to understand something without knowing anything about nothing?
Say that again?
Are you able to know something? For
Yeah,
example, if
yeah, go
I asked you, okay, this microphone here, if you didn't know the meaning of nothing, does it still exist?
Of course.
So you don't need nothing, the understanding of nothing, to make sense of everything else.
No, I understand.
Because you see, for us, our senses are adequate to understand most things.
Absolutely.
Yes? Our senses are adequate to understand most things. However, there are certain things which our senses are unable to pick up. We use certain devices, for example, radio waves. You got a mobile phone? Yes? Do you see the radio waves?
No, you don't.
No. Do dogs hear radio waves?
Yes.
No, they don't. Yes, they're sound waves. You're thinking about sound waves.
Just,
Radio
different
waves are
frequencies.
different. So radio waves are measured by certain devices which scientists have invented, and they can measure that. But the thing is, what I'm saying is that even for that, we need our senses to decipher the result of those devices.
Yeah, yeah.
So we still use our senses. What I was getting about, so I think the conversation started with consciousness.
Yes.
So you see, the reason the scientists community and those people who are philosophers and other people as well, they talk about consciousness is because this is something very difficult to pinpoint. Yes, the definition of it, to understand it. Yes, you can have scores of definitions about it. But the important thing is that we all recognize that it exists. It's not a concept. It is something that truly exists. And for us to make meaning of anything, your and my consciousness is vital. It's very, very important.
Well, one thing that's interesting about conceptions of consciousness is that there may be consciousnesses, if that's the plural, that are greater than ours.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, it's just an interesting idea. You know what I mean?
That's
Because we're at this level, but maybe there's something greater.
Yeah, there might be some people who might have higher consciousness than us. They might be able to have this something called the sixth sense, you know? Who knows? Maybe that is a different kind of consciousness, a different level that they operate on. I have no problem with that. What I'm saying is that consciousness does exist. And the question for the materialists, yes, and this is where you come in. Even though you're an agnostic, you still believe in materialism to some degree. Because the answers that you'll be seeking about God are most likely from a materialistic perspective, that you will be seeking some sort of, because I'm not saying you're saying this, many people will say, show me God, that he exists. If I can't see him, I don't believe in him. Yes, to me that's ludicrous. Because you see with our naked eye, we cannot even see the sun on a nice sunny day, yes, without having an issue by looking at it directly.
Sure, but we have evidence that it exists.
No, I'm not saying it isn't, it's just an analogy.
Right.
Yes? So there are many things that we cannot see with our naked eye. That doesn't mean they don't exist. I'm giving an example of the radio waves. Yes? So what I'm saying is that this is not something that is a criteria you should be looking for in seeking God. You see, we see the world around us. That is something that is a definite, that is a given. It is. I personally don't think that's an illusion. I think it does really exist. I think you both exist in front of me and I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to some sort of an, holographic creation.
Simulation.
Yeah, simulation. Okay. Yeah. I'm talking to real people. Yeah, not a matrix. Yeah, not something that is made up by simulation. It's real. Now, for all this to exist, we need to ask the question, where did it originate from? Because you see, mostly science tells you how things came, what it is. Yes, not how it came into being, not the origin of it.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it's the other way around. They don't say what, they answer the how.
Yeah.
The how these things work or how that thing works, but how it originates, they don't tell you that.
Yeah, because we don't know.
I don't think the scientists.
That's intellectual honesty.
Well,
no, but
we don't know, but we want to find out.
That was why I posed the question.
To know something, yes, the scientists need at least two things. Without that, they will not be able to operate. Time and space. Yes? In order to postulate any theory, in their minds, they need to know the concept of time and the concept of space. Without that, they're handicapped. You cannot even think of a theory to postulate, let alone perform an experiment in a lab. So you see, science is if you're looking for scientific evidence of something without time and space, then I think you're using the wrong tool, because science is unable.
So there's no evidence for God?
No, I'm saying science is not a tool.
So there's no scientific evidence for God?
Well, I think there's something, when you think about scientific methodology, there are many methodologies, okay? They use, for example, either tools of observation, or they use something called, you can think of certain theories without it even being existing. And you can say, okay, I rule out this, I rule out that, and I've come to the conclusion that this is the only way. So if we use that methodology of basically understanding how everything came into existence, you come, and correct me if I'm wrong, to two possibilities. Either it came from something, or it came from nothing. If we narrow it down to the simplest digits.
Sure.
To say.
I got a question for you, by the way.
No, sorry. I just want to.
Do you agree with that?
No, I absolutely agree.
And it comes look, it did not create itself because the universe is not conscious.
Well, you're saying it didn't create itself. You assume that you know the answer, but you can't possibly know
I'm asking
the
you a question. Is the universe conscious?
I'm asking you. How could you know the origin of the universe?
Because we know that matter, for example, is not something that is. Sorry, when I say matter, I mean non-sentient beings, non-sentient things. Whether it is a rock or whether it is the clouds or something like that, do you think these inanimate objects have consciousness?
I don't think so.
Okay, so the universe, when I talk about the universe, I'm talking about the inanimate objects within the universe. Do they have consciousness? Okay, because before life existed, yes, from a scientific perspective, they believe that the universe existed, like 13.8 billion years or whatever it is, yeah? Nearly 14 billion years ago.
Okay.
It came into being.
Yeah.
At that time, there was no life. And they agree with that, yes? Because the environment to support life wasn't there. So the question arises to you, does the universe, which consists of inanimate objects at that time, when there was no environment to support life, was that universe conscious? The early stages of the universe.
By the way that I characterize consciousness of myself, probably not.
So inanimate objects, do you agree, don't have consciousness?
Well, I can't tell, but I would say probably
I'm saying
not.
inanimate objects. Why would you say probably?
Because
until
I
you had
don't know.
until you had certain idea that there is a possibility for an inanimate object to have consciousness. Because many people say energy is conscious.
But I think
This
that's
is something
the
that they have to
core
prove.
of what we're saying.
Yes?
I think that might be the difference in where we're coming from. Maybe is
I
that
think you're coming from proof, and he's coming from a faith.
Well,
I'm
That's
seeking
what
proof.
it is.
I'm also seeking proof. That's the reason I asked for evidence, if there is any, to show that inanimate objects have consciousness.
But what is faith?
The only reason you're saying probably is because you're uncertain that they have consciousness or they don't have consciousness.
yeah, because it's
To me, whenever I look at inanimate objects, I don't see consciousness. I don't see that a rock is aware of its environment. So if I go to strike it with a hammer, the rock won't just move away, trying to protect itself.
Yeah.
Or the
but
rock is
my
seeking
perspective is that we have a very limited realm of knowledge, and our knowledge is constantly advancing. And who knows how our perceptions and conceptions of ideas will change in the future as we discover more. That's my perspective as a skeptic.
No, but the thing is, even then, when you talk about consciousness, yes, you are aware of animate objects and inanimate objects. The reason they're called animate is because of this life
Yes.
that they have, they possess.
I understand that. As I currently understand
now,
it.
what you're doing is that in the future we might know, but in the future you might not never know either. Okay, so this principle of inanimate objects having no consciousness, no life, is something that is going to stand throughout time. Who knows?
Maybe
No,
so.
I understand.
Yes,
that.
but the thing is this: if the universe, we have to go with past now, not the future. We have to go with past.
Okay.
In the past, if the universe came into being, and we know that it came into being, it didn't exist at one point, then it began to exist. Do you agree with that, or?
I've
are
heard
you
the
gonna-
theories.
What do you think? What do you think?
I've heard the theory that there was a point of nothingness and the universe expanded. I've also heard theories that the universe has expanded and exploded and contracted throughout history. It's something that we can't possibly know. So it doesn't really matter what I think.
The second theory that you mentioned, that the problem with that eternal universe is the problem that's going to arise for that is the infinite regression. Because infinite regression means something that you cannot perceive something to exist if there is the issue of infinite regression. Like, I don't know if you've heard of this analogy of a library in which you're standing to borrow a book and there's infinite number of people in front of you. Remember we talked about infinite earlier to understand the concept in our communication? So imagine if there are infinite number of people standing in front of you. Will you ever be able to borrow a book?
Probably not. But I mean, I don't really know where you're going with it.
No,
I'm not supporting the idea. I'm
It's
just
not
saying
probably
there's
not,
ideas.
it is never. The reason for that is there is infinite number of people, meaning not ending. It will never end.
Cool.
So you will never get a book. So if you use that infinite regression in this eternal universe theory, then you will understand that universe cannot exist if there was such a scenario of infinite regression. You see what I mean?
Well, I think one of the core differences, like what you said, belief and skepticism. The other thing is that I'm comfortable with uncertainty. That's where I'm coming from.
No, it's not.
Well,
it's not the
I'm going to
uncertainty.
say what I think.
Okay, fine.
So I'm comfortable with being uncertain, of not knowing, of wanting to understand, and I'm not wanting to force that on you. Like, you think whatever you want, that's cool. But like for me, I'm okay with not being sure. Like, maybe we have a conception of logic and we're running off logic. We're trying to look at the universe. That would be an infinite regression. That's illogical. How can that happen? But maybe there's a realm of existence where logic, as humans understand it, is not applicable.
Sorry, a realm
Yeah.
where there is no logic applied.
Yeah, it's a
okay, now
possibility.
you see when you say that is a possibility, that is illogical. So I'll tell you why. Because for you to think of something illogical to exist, for example, if you can think about a pink elephant flying, yes? You can think about it. That doesn't mean that it is something that you cannot think about, but for it to be logically possible, what do you say?
I don't know.
You see, I can think of a lot of things, yes. But you see, you're prepared to go through these speculations, if I may call them, but you're not prepared to believe or be certain about some certain things which are logical and which have no other alternatives except for there to be an intelligent designer, a creator, a god. For all this to be coming into existence. Because if look, I said if you break it down, you'll come to either it existed by itself, or it came from nothing, or something brought it into existence. If you can think of any other possibilities from these three possibilities, please let me know.
Well, the point is that I'm not certain. On you go.
Sorry, I think the question was, who defines logical?
Who defines logical? Good question. Logic for us human beings to understand is by our own understanding of what makes sense. Okay, so like I gave you the example of a pink elephant flying. Yes? Would you consider that logical or illogical?
Depends.
I'm asking you, does it exist?
It depends who you're speaking to.
I'm speaking to you.
For me personally, no. But other people might
Okay,
argue otherwise.
how did you determine whether it's logical or illogical?
From everything that I've observed coming
Good.
up.
So this is what we all define as being logical or illogical. But I understand where you're coming from. That certain people's logic of being logical might not be yours. Okay. And other people, it can be subjective in certain things. But there are many objective truths out there, which are something that we shouldn't be skeptical about. Okay. I don't know. You must have seen those flat earthers here.
I got to be skeptical about everything. Yeah, I talked to the flat earthers, and it's very interesting. I was going to bring that up because many people come at them with science, and I think that's not a good strategy because you can look at them and they have a very strong belief in something. And I would imagine that if you showed them indisputable evidence to contradict them, they would never believe it.
Because they didn't start with science in the first place.
Right, it's deeper. It's a spiritual idea. I think it's a response to nihilism, this flat earth theory, because they go right back to spirituality. They're like, well, it's God and then you're under God. Man is not over man.
Sorry.
And it's about a spiritual idea.
Just as a passenger,
No,
just as a passenger to this whole talk, because I feel like that's what I've been. I've been a passenger. It just seems like I said, who defines logic in this argument? And he wants proof, whereas you have faith. And the reason I said faith is because
I used logic so far. I haven't used much of talking about faith here. Most of mine was basically determined by how would you rule out certain possibilities of how we came into existence. Yes, and to me that is very a scientific method of ruling out certain things. And this is what I use as my approach.
Yeah.
You see, I did not say, oh, God created and that's it, end of story. You see, I asked questions to you that there are three possibilities. Either it came from by itself, or it came from nothing, or something created it, the universe. You see, if you, then I even asked if there are other possibilities, please let me know.
Right.
So I've been using logic so far to determine how we can understand our existence.
I was just gonna say, to be fair, just to play at devil's advocate, you've been using the process of elimination as opposed to actual logic. You haven't presented any theory forward, presenting your own logical reasoning as to why you believe something actually exists. You've just eliminated his possibility of being completely skeptic. So what I'm trying to say is, when we're talking about logic, it's really important that we do define what logic is in particular. Because right now, logic doesn't necessarily mean you cancel out everything, because that's what he's doing. He's cancelling out, he's being skeptic, he's cancelling out all the inconsistencies. You're cancelling out the inconsistencies in his argument. So now you have to present a theory forward.
When you say cancelling out, you see, I did place on the table all my cards. And then I asked him, using your logic, you tell me whether this is wrong or right. Absolutely. And then I even, like I said, I even expanded more than that, that if you, from your logic, have other possibilities, please let me know.
Absolutely.
So this is, you see, this is something that I have used as our own understanding of our world.
Of course.
And you, I'm sure that you, when you think about it, you wouldn't think it's illogical to ask these questions.
No,
yes.
sure.
So if it's logical and if it's making sense and it's not something completely outlandish, then I think we can quite easily communicate about the possibilities of our existence, where did we come from.
But this is where I was going to say logic is very important, and defining it is very important. You say it's logical to question all of those things, but I'd say, to what degree is it logical? If you're someone who works 9 to 9, doesn't have much time, has to look after your family, has to pay bills, etc., and you do not have the time, otherwise you won't survive, what logic does it make for you to then invest time that will take money out of your family guidance? That's what I'm trying to say. Logic is very subjective. Logic is different for him and it's different for yourself.
I don't think logic is subjective. There's a lot of objectiveness in our world that we see which are not subjective. For example, if I asked you, what is a triangle? Yes?
Yeah.
Everyone will give me an objective definition of a triangle with 3 sides.
I've got a
well,
question.
almost everyone.
That's
I wouldn't say you employing your logic your understanding of the shape of a triangle is illogical or is subjective even.
So let's
But
take this
that's,
deeper.
can I quickly
There are many things which are objective truths, and you need to
No,
understand
absolutely, absolutely. But you just gave me the example of the triangle.
Yeah.
We've allocated what a triangle is by naming it. Now, what is gender?
What is gender?
Yeah, what is gender?
Defined by your genes, I guess.
Gender.
See, I use that definition
absolutely,
because
absolutely.
anyone can use an operation to change the gender, but they can't change the genes, can they?
That's brilliant. That's
Yes?
brilliant. That's brilliant.
There you
The
go.
word gender actually comes from type. It doesn't actually define the sex. It has nothing to do with the sex. Originally, when gender was made, it was made to be different themes and different types and different categories. That was the original etymology of gender.
Different
That's
types
why
of what?
Etymology. Different types. It's just basically to say categories. It
Oh,
was
you're
the
talking
word-
about the etymology of the word.
the etymology. So what I'm trying to say is when we allocate words and you say there's objective truth, even in, say, the etymology, not necessarily, because over time, these truths change.
Bro,
So-
I wouldn't use etymology as my evidence to understand
No,
gender.
but I was
I would
using
use something that is something objective, like for example the genes in everybody's bloodstream that you can quite easily understand, and you
talking
can see
about the X
this is
and the Y.
scientific.
No, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
You're
exactly.
talking about the meaning of the words
I'm talking,
changing.
but that's the
Yeah.
thing. That's the thing.
So I wouldn't use that because you see
about,
etymology is changed throughout history.
Sure,
Yes?
I agree.
But I wouldn't use that methodology.
Yeah,
So to me that wouldn't be logical.
Okay, I've got a question.
But I just want to point. No, sorry. I just want to point out. You asked
Are
me.
we going somewhere with this
You asked me
discussion now?
what was a
It seems to be
triangle. You
all-
asked
I
me
wanna
what
get
was a
deeper.
triangle.
Yeah, go on.
If I were to ask someone who knew Pig Latin what is gender, he would then give me the
but-
original etymology.
But
of
you
it.
see, that is
So-
not the correct way of going about defining things. Because many things, for example, the word gay has changed today.
Yeah.
Yes? At one point it used to be happy. But if I'm going to use the historic definition or meaning of gay, then calling someone who's homosexual gay would be wrong. Okay? Because then I'm using a different definition, a
it's-
different terminology.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is this, I would not use etymology, and I know where you're coming from, but you see, everyone doesn't use etymology to understand the definition of things. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
Sure.
Oh my God.
We done the etymology.
No, it was just with the gay point, right? With the gay point in particular, there was a reason as to why it was actually changed from gay from homosexuality. There was actually a reason as to
Let's
why.
save that for
It was a
another
lot
time.
more. Okay, fair enough. But I'm just saying, in particular, when
Different
we are
discussion
talking about
maybe.
objective truths, we have to be
I
careful.
just wanted to prove about
No, absolutely.
the,
but we have
the
to
meaning
be,
of words changing in our history.
But I think
That's all I'm saying.
I think necessarily like say this gentleman's point, we need to be careful what we assert as objective truth. Like right now, I can say that I'm darker than this gentleman, and I can prove that because of the melanin in my skin, and we know this, and that's objective truth that can never change. But with etymology, that can change. So we have to be very careful what we assert as objective truth, and I think this is where this gentleman has come from. Sorry, carry on. I'm still
So
the
I'm going to
passenger.
ask another question, a different one. Maybe we can move the convo around. So, let's say, so if you're saying maybe these things are logical with the creation of the universe and such, I want to ask a question about God, or maybe your understanding of God. Is it logical for God to create life? If we are created by a God, was it logical for that to happen?
God is the creator. God creates life, living things and non-living things. So by definition of the term God, yes, he is also the creator of everything and everyone. Does that answer your question?
Not really.
It's a bit of a logical fact. Forgive me, but that's a bit of a logical fact.
Why is it a logical fact?
Earlier, with respect,
No, fine. You're allowed to give your opinion, no problem.
I was just about
I want to
say
know
as
why
well.
it's a logical fallacy.
Mutation is a random occurrence.
Second,
Mutation is a random occurrence.
you said, because earlier on you suggested that there are scientific theories that suggest the creation of the universe. Yes? And one of the things you said was that,
sorry, did I say that?
well, I think you
I don't think you were listening. I said the scientists do not tell you the origin of things. The scientists explain how they perform, how they work. Yes. So these things, but in fact, the scientists will not tell you about abiogenesis or about the existence of the universe. They stop at a certain point, and there's a reason. I explained there's a reason they stop at a certain point, because without time and space, scientists are handicapped. So they go and reach a point called the singularity.
your answer is God.
No, I'm not saying my answer. I'm just explaining to you why the scientists stop at a certain point. They stop at the singularity because that is how far time and space will take them. Beyond that, they don't know whether time existed or space existed, let alone matter.
And that's what scientific theories are. We don't
I'm just telling you why scientists stop there. But as a theist, I don't stop there. I go beyond that. I said because the universe began to exist, it must have a cause.
Can I quickly ask?
If you look at that, look at that logically, with respect.
Yeah, go on, go on.
Where did God come from? Where did Almighty come?
Good question. It's a question
what existed before God? I mean that
No, that's fine. You're perfectly all right to ask me that question. This is the most common question asked when I make this point. So you're not alone on that. God, by definition, is the first cause, uncaused cause. Okay, no one created him. By definition of God, it is not like he began to exist, like the universe. Remember I said, everything that begins to exist, everything that begins to exist, everything that begins to exist has a cause. God did not begin to exist, God always existed eternally. Yes, because by definition of the term God, this is something as theists we believe that God is the uncaused cause. He is the one who created everything, no one created him. So for you to ask the question, did anyone create God or who had existed before God, you're assuming that he began to exist at some point. That's not true.
Can I quickly ask, you said scientists are handicapped when it comes to if without time and space. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I can. Because the reason the scientists stop at this singularity when explaining the Big Bang Theory is because of this, that they cannot see beyond that singularity. Right. So there was this Big Bang at a certain point, and that is what basically it started all this matter and everything, gravity and whatnot, everything that exists, they came from this particular point in time.
But the methodology...
And then the expansion, but what happened before that, they can only speculate.
That's asserting that's the methodology of all scientists. Where I understand the methodology...
They can only speculate beyond
where I understand, and you can correct me as a biologist on this.
Because, like I said, because they're using scientific methodology, and using scientific methodology, they have to use time and space in order to explain. They cannot know, and they will never know if they only use a limited tool like science. So you're trying to explain the metaphysics with science, which is the wrong tool.
No, we're not trying to explain it. We say that we don't know.
No, you will always say you don't know. The scientists,
That's not a bad thing.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the thing is that always saying don't know doesn't mean that the answer doesn't exist.
That's true.
For others. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the only three possibilities which I gave you is either the universe created by nothing, or it created itself, or someone intelligent created it. But now you tell me if there is another way, another alternative to these three methodologies of explaining how the universe came into being, then please let me know. But so far, I've narrowed it down to these three.
But the thing is...
But the Big Bang is included in this third definition that someone intelligent caused us.
No.
Why not? You see all these systems you see in our body and in our universe, they have some sort of an order. If you look at the second law of thermodynamics about the entropy, yes, you cannot have order from chaos.
You can.
Show me that.
This gentleman's skin here, apparently it's sphericized, but it's a mutation.
How do you know it's a mutation?
Can you reproduce a mutation?
It's adaptation. How do you know it's mutation?
That's what they said.
Who said?
That's what they said.
No, they said adaptation.
No.
So when he goes in the sun, he gets
I
tanned.
think a lot of adaptations are caused by mutations that become favorably selected.
No, but mutations by definition are not always good. They're harmful.
Absolutely. Most
Okay.
of the time
So when your skin, your pigmentation turns darker, it is your body trying to protect you from the harmful rays of the sun.
Absolutely.
You're looking at me as you should look at me. I didn't say anything.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
But
So what I'm saying is that is not something which is chaotic or random. That is something which is designed.
It is
designed in your system to protect you. You can call it natural selection.
For the most part.
You see, everything natural selection does, yes, one thing you'll realize is that natural selection cannot explain your consciousness.
It can.
Try doing that with Darwinism.
It can.
Trust me.
That's where I was trying to go.
Okay, show me how natural selection explains.
Okay.
Why do you think we verge into groups?
Say again?
Why do you think we automatically verge into groups as opposed to competition?
Emerge into groups.
Instead of a tournament society, why do we rely on each other?
We're collective.
Oh, you're talking about the social aspect of human beings?
Aspect, yeah.
Do you think every animal is social?
Say that again?
Does every animal, in order to live?
That's the good thing. That's the good
but that's
thing.
what I'm telling you. When I talk about us, I talk about the living beings on this planet. I don't talk about only human beings. So for us, human beings, yes, there is consciousness. For the animals, I think they are aware of their environment as well. So there's some degree of consciousness, maybe lower to us, but there's still some sort of consciousness. Yes, if you're talking about their existence, their ability to think, their ability to survive, their ability to even mate or to eat food, all this requires certain system of their understanding of the environment. I'm not saying they have a nervous system like ours, yes, which is formed to a degree is much higher than those animals or organisms. Yes, it is at a higher degree, but still they're able to think and evaluate based on their understanding of the environment.
But biologically, we know and we can demonstrate that a lot of these animals and a lot of these ecosystems have evolved from certain pro and con scenarios, especially human beings in particular. When we're talking about, again, why do people prefer to go in groups as opposed to have a tournament society where the strongest is on top and it's a small section?
We are social beings,
they
so
understand, but it's quite simple. They understand that they can gain more resources with teamwork than they can with a
That's why I said we are social animals.
We can observe this and we can prove this. We have different societies and we have different animal systems, right, to kind of like draw an objective kind of comparison between. And that's where I'm talking about, when he's talking about having the evidence, there are certain things that we can observe, and that's consciousness on the animal side. Now, where you assert that we have no way, sorry, I think you were saying we have no way.
I'm saying Darwinism cannot prove consciousness, because if you look at Darwinism, you know what Darwinism, those people who believe in Darwinism believe?
I didn't realize Darwinism was a term.
Well, it is a term. It's become sort of, some of them defend Darwinism to the extent like a religion.
But the thing
yes,
is,
exactly.
But the thing is,
so these people who compare themselves to basically believing in the doctrine of Darwinism, they would say that we don't believe that this that matter has a meaning or a purpose. It's just random matter coming together and having some sort of a some sort of an objective, but not a meaningful one. These are just, it's accident. That's a good term.
There's a misrepresentation going on, because I mean, I'm not interested in people who call themselves Darwinists.
Sorry, I just want to know about. I just wanted to point out.
So I want to understand, if you've read Darwin and his theories, I want to understand how does he come across the concept of, or not the concept, the reality of this consciousness that we all have.
I'm not sure that's what he was.
Because that was my question.
Because I was trying.
That's what I'm asking you. Not everything can determine.
Do human beings not live off learning from their mistakes consciousness?
No, I'm not saying we don't. Of course
they do.
We learn from our mistakes. I'm not saying
no. But from what I understand from Darwinism, it's the idea.
Oh, that's losing his shit.
Yeah, when we're talking about Darwinism, when we're talking about, is it evolution in particular we're talking about? Yeah, evolution is the idea that animals take every advantageous feature and then they pass it on to their next lenient line, right?
How do you know what's advantageous?
Say that again?
How do you know what's advantageous?
It's translated in the amount of it's translated by your ability to repopulate after. If you have advantageous features, you're more likely to have sex and thus reproduce more than the people who don't have disadvantage.
Yeah, but how would they know to pass this on without their ability to pass it on?
It's not about knowing. Give me 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds. Let me finish. It's not about knowing whether or not. It's the system and it's the ecosystem. So in terms of, if I had horses' legs, weird analogy, but if I had horses' legs, right, and our system was ran on hard labor, right, who's more likely to survive, me or this gentleman here?
It depends on how you think, not your legs. You see, this is what I'm saying. Just because you're stronger doesn't mean you are better. You're better surviving, because the dinosaurs were much stronger than us. The T-Rex was much stronger than us.
But that doesn't take away.
That doesn't mean that they are able to survive.
I'll give you a rebuttal to that. I'll give you a rebuttal to that. We have a system now, right, of women who would rather choose alpha males as opposed to males who actually value their intellect. Now, if we take the society that we live in, intellect is much more of an advantageous feature, but they still go on their prehistoric drive to want the male who's got the V-shaped triangle, yes?
I don't think that's alpha male.
Say that again?
You don't know the meaning of alpha male.
It's about personality
traits. Exactly.
No, I'm talking about
a bodybuilder is not necessarily an alpha male.
Give me 2 seconds. Let me finish.
I know many people who are giants, but they are gentle giants.
Even if we're talking about that, in particular, right? Yeah, even if we're...
Our consciousness, when you say it's evolved, yes?
Guys,
this is our knowledge that is evolved, not the
consciousness. Give me 2 seconds,
guys. Our knowledge has grown, yes. But when you talk about consciousness, your consciousness was able to use that knowledge to make things better for you, perhaps, or maybe not. Because to me, when I look at our world today, yes, there are more nuclear weapons today which can destroy all of us than there was during the Stone Age or the Bronze Age. Yes? So I think today we live, even with our education, with our knowledge, and with our consciousness, we are much more in danger of being extinguished than we were back then. But you see, this again comes down to, are we more intelligent now than back then? That to me is questionable. Because there are people who lived a long time ago, who built the pyramids, who are much knowledgeable. Today you need lots of scientists to basically make sense of how did they construct this huge pyramids without the cranes and without all the equipment and everything.
I would completely object to that, just in the
Which
sense
part?
the consciousness in terms of historically. I understand where you say...
I made a difference between consciousness and knowledge also.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And you were saying that we have nuclear weapons now that can extinguish us, yes? Back in the day we had the plague, and that wiped out a third of the European population, right? Now...
Which was local.
Say that again?
Which was local, mostly.
Yeah, it was local.
The plagues were mostly local. The nuclear weapons can destroy the entire Earth. It can be a global catastrophe.
I don't know what the argument is
It
here.
can be a global catastrophe. Even if you drop one atomic bomb that some of these
I understand,
the Americans and the Russians have, it can annihilate almost all of our population.
I was basically saying...
And for years we wouldn't be growing any plantation, any plants or any animals.
I was saying having more dangerous tools doesn't necessarily...
No, I'll just give you an example. I said about the evolution of consciousness that came into play. When you talk about evolution, yes, you got to be very careful. Evolving doesn't always mean, in this at least in this context of knowledge, to be good.
But if you look at the way that we live now, you know, you say that maybe we might not be. You know, some people think that we've become more intelligent over the.
Well, I would actually dispute that. I would dispute that.
Again,
in certain things, yes. In how things work, yes, we have become more intelligent.
The world we live in, surely,
yes,
is a scientific sort of miracle. The fact that you probably came here in a transport go faster than you
absolutely,
could walk.
yes.
You use electricity all the time.
Lots of scientific developments, but then there are many of the scientific developments which also can get us in danger. Like I told you about the nuclear.
But what are we talking about? What's the code of argument? Because we're all over the place here.
I think it's just generally...
No, I think this gentleman here came with... Sorry, what was your argument?
I think it can, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, you can see it. And I think
no, when you say we evolved, in what have we evolved? We're still human beings back then, we're still human beings today. Our knowledge, look, our knowledge has grown certainly. We have lost some of the ancient knowledge as well. Yes, so it's not always just linear that knowledge is always being acquired. We are also losing some knowledge. Because there were many things in the past people that knew. Yes, we have lost the knowledge of that today. Yes, if it wasn't, for example, it wasn't for the Arabs who took this Greek learning and learning from India and translated it into Arabic and then passed it on to the Europeans, previous to which they were in the Dark Ages, then that knowledge would have been lost as well. So we pass on knowledge from different places to make our lives better. That is the ultimate goal, to make it better, our existence. But it's not always the case. Sometimes we also do harm. For example, look, today, if you look at all these people who are suffering diseases, suffering ailments, it's from the food that we eat. The amount of chemicals, the amount of impurities that have been injected in the animals and the plants, and that is coming into our system, is harming the people around the world globally. Yes, the amount of cancer, the amount of other diseases, the amount of dementia, the amount of depression, the amount of stress that we see today. To be honest, you know, if you talk about people who lived previously, they had much less of all this.
With respect to
See what I mean?
You're making my argument because there seems to be no rhyme or reason, and that's workings of the brain.
I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's an accident. If it was an accident, then you wouldn't see things in harmony. Like, for example, if the sun doesn't shine, the plants die. Yes, all these things coming into play at a particular time, and only on the planet Earth. Yes, when there are hundreds and thousands of other galaxies out there, we have been looking for aliens for I don't know how many centuries.
No, but it's very difficult. It's very likely we'll find life on other planets.
You heard of the fine-tuning argument? The fine-tuning argument, like for example, everything has some sort of an order. Everything, for example, you know, yeah, there's a balance in the universe. There's only adequate gravity on Earth. It's not too much or too low. Others will be either floating or stuck to the ground. You see what I mean? For life to exist on this planet, everything seems to be finely balanced. To me, if everything of that nature was an accident, then I think that is, to me, that would be a belief.
Absolutely not.
The same things, right?
We spoke about infinite regression earlier. I don't think you were there. But that is illogical. From scientifically speaking, it wouldn't exist an eternal universe.
Guys, I'm going to say it's been nice. It's been nice.
Likewise, yeah.
I would work on the definition because
I think we should wrap it up because it's gone too long.
Open just allows
people don't like to look at videos that are too long, so I think we should wrap it up, inshallah.
Yeah, you wanted to ask.
We should talk more about a different topic. Yeah.
What's your name, my friend?
William.
William, nice meeting you. Take care. Thank you, guys. Assalamu alaikum.
Democracy originated in slave society, and it was based upon slavery. So in ancient Greece and in ancient Rome, there were democratic rights for the slave owners. And those who were slaves were not considered to be real human beings. Aristotle used to use the word speaking tools. So they were like robots, if you like, or non-humans. Meanwhile, because the slaves did the work for the